Hello and welcome to the Anti-Social Worker Podcast. I am the anti-social worker, Carla G. Please note that due to YouTube's community guidelines, there are words and topics that are not allowed to be discussed. When I violate these guidelines, you will hear some nice music to bide your time. To hear the full unedited version of the podcast, go to locals.com and X, formerly known as Twitter. Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the Anti-Social Worker Podcast. Let's begin. This first episode is a bit on the spicy side, but that's okay. A little spiciness never hurt anybody, and we can handle it. I also want to set the tone for what to expect from this content. And as you will see, I'm focusing on one aspect in particular of our profession, which is the way social workers and/or therapists are clinically treating children. In future episodes, I will continue to discuss these reasons, plus a lot more in much greater detail. So here we go. Here are the top 5 reasons social workers are failing society. 1. Social workers are not speaking up for and protecting kids from... If you're a social worker or therapist listening and you are not promoting this ideology and not signing off on harmful and irreversible medications and interventions, then I'm not referring to you. If you are, though, then I am speaking to you. 2. Social workers need to take greater responsibility to follow the social work code of ethics regarding the treatment of supposed... 3. Social workers need to stay vigilant against popular political agendas and empower the client and not the agenda. 4. Social workers need to do their history homework to understand the current cultural climate. 5. Social workers need to remember the concept of person in environment. And as you may have concluded by now, I am not a fan of what has happened to and what continues to happen in our profession. Our profession of social work, which is led by the NASW, or National Association of Social Workers, has been completely captured by this leftist... In other words, I am not a fan of gender. So here's the thing. I strongly believe this to be true. And it is this exact belief that has inspired me to do this podcast in the first place, and it's motivating me to speak out. I truly believe that if the public, parents, and teachers even knew the truth of what is actually behind the trend and why it's being taught to your kids in their schools, you would be better equipped to handle what you may have to experience down the road with your child. I want you to have the correct perception and framework of the intention of this entire agenda and how to find solutions to handle it. For example, if one day your daughter comes home and says she's really a boy, you could see it for what it is. It's not a gender or biological issue like they're marketing it to be. It's an issue of manipulation and the brainwashing of an ideology with the intentional shaping of your kid's psyche. So the question of what all of this really comes down to is, statistically speaking, your kid is not trans. They have been taught that they may be trans, and that's a huge difference. And that is the exact difference between being organically trans or being manufactured trans. The biggest point I need to make here is the need to reframe the question that therapists and doctors have been perpetrating on parents for years. Social workers and therapists are manipulating parents into allowing their kids to ingest irreversibly harmful drugs and surgeries under the guise of compassion. So we need to change that incredibly false and manipulative question that's being perpetrated on parents. Would you like to have a dead daughter or a live trans son? I would like to propose a new question, except this question has the onus on the therapist and not the parent. The new framing needs to be, are you the therapist that's going to correctly assess and explore my child's root mental health issues and provide sound coping skills? Or do I have to find a competent and courageous therapist willing to follow their code of ethics and not push for harmful medication and interventions on my kid? I am fully aware that this has been happening for years now, but it doesn't seem to be getting any better. In the book Lost in Transnation by Dr. Miriam Grossman, an outspoken advocate for the protection of children against the trans agenda, and I highly recommend that you read this book, it's fantastic. Dr. Grossman states this on page 16, quote, "In my own quest to understand the bizarre evolution of gender identity, I discovered the process would require studying post-structuralism, first-wave feminism, queer theory, gender schema theory, second-wave feminism, Marxist feminism, anti-essentialism, radical feminism, third-wave feminism, and radical gender theory." Then she says, "That's not going to happen. I'm not going to pretend I even know what any of those are," says Dr. Grossman. And that's okay. That's where this podcast comes in, to explain all of the social and political aspects of this trans movement and how it is clinically unsound and how it's destroying kids, families, and humanity itself. When you start looking into this more deeply, you come to find out that this whole movement is disguised as a civil rights issue, which it's really not. It's really a social and political agenda with the intention of hurting society. So with all of that being said, let's find solutions to guarding your kids and your family from this trans ideological nightmare. And again, I firmly believe that if people knew why this culture decline was really happening, it would begin to take some of the pressure off of parents thinking that they really have a trans child. Because statistically speaking, your kid is not trans. They're being taught they might be trans. So I hope you join me in the future so we can put an end to this ideological madness and keep your children protected from the very institutions that intend to destroy them. Bye now.